So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon or morning if you're joining us from the West Coast, and welcome to the launch of the Outcomes Estimation Tools Training webinar series. Thank you for being here today. For those of you who don't know, American Farmland Trust is a national nonprofit founded in 1980. We here at AFT believe that saving the land that sustains us means protecting farmland, promoting sound farming practices, and keeping farmers on the land. Alrighty. There we go. First, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Kinsey Reese, Ag Conservation Innovations Program and Communications Manager at American Farmland Trust, and your host for today's session. I have a bachelor's degree in agricultural education from Kansas State University and taught agriculture in a 7 through 12 classroom before joining AFT. At AFT and outside of this EPA Tools Training webinar project, I work with farmers on adopting conservation practices, assist with AFT's Brighter Future Fund grant program, and manage the communications for the ACI initiative. Additionally, I farm with my husband and 3 small children in Western Kansas and recently started my own segment of our business selling pork directly from our farm. Second, I would like to go through a little housekeeping. Today, we're using the Zoom webinar platform. As attendees, you will have your camera and microphones turned off throughout the event. I would like to point out the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. You can use this to ask any questions you have at any time. We've reserved the last 15 minutes of this webinar to answer those questions. You may ask them using your name, and you may also do so anonymously. One great feature of this platform is the vote up option, in which you can vote for questions that are similar to the ones that you are going to type or that you would like to hear more about. The recording for this webinar will be made available on our Guide to Outcomes Estimation Tools website listed here and on American Farmland Trust YouTube page a few days after each event. Following each webinar, you will receive an email within 3 to 4 days that will provide the links and presentations for each webinar, as well as announce the next month's speaker. We will also include a link to webinar registration, and we absolutely welcome you sharing that link with colleagues and friends that may be interested in joining in. Finally, to help promote or improve our webinar series, I'm going to share in the chat box a link to a 7-question anonymous evaluation survey that should take about 2 minutes to complete. Please click on that now so you can see when you can take the survey right after the event ends. I'm going to put that in the chat now. For today's webinar, we'll be going over the needs assessment results, presenting an overview of the webinar series, walking you through the Outcomes Estimation Tools Guide, and learning about a back-of-the-envelope method to estimating water quality outcomes and brand new draft Excel-based tool that helps estimate project and county level outcomes. We would also like to thank our funders, the EPA, Office of Water, and the Walton Family Foundation for making all of this possible. And while my colleague, Julie, is setting up to review the results of the needs assessment, let's see who's in the room with some polls. Okay. Launch. Oh. We have 3 quick poll questions that you'll see come across the screen. The first question is, which one sector best reflects your occupation? Government agency, non-government organization, academic institution, corporation or environmental markets firm, or other? 2, if there are only 4 types of audience members, which one best describes you? A developer of outcomes estimation tools, methods, or models, current user of outcomes estimation tools, methods, and models, potential future user of outcomes estimation tools, method, and models, and person interested in learning about outcomes estimation tools and issues. And number 3, what is your experience level with the AFT Guide to Water Quality, Climate, Social, and Economic Outcomes Estimation Tools? Had never heard of it, but never used it, heard of it, and used it. I refer to it often. And we'll take a minute to let you get your answers in. Like, if I can just get a couple more people.
We're at 90%, Kinsey.
Yep, I think I'm going to go ahead and end that
Mm-hmm.
and share the results. Looks like the majority of you guys are coming from the government agency or non-government organization, which makes complete sense. A lot of current users of outcomes estimation tools and methods as well. And with the AFT guide, a lot of people have heard of it, but never used it. So maybe that's something that Michelle can change here. So Julie, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing this poll and let you take it away.
Thank you, Kinsey. I'm going to start by introducing myself. My name is Julie Platts. I'm the Agriculture Conservation Innovation Program Associate. I host farmer peer-to-peer meetings and Women for the Land learning circles in 2 separate watersheds in Ohio. I'm also the regional lead for Ohio and Michigan with the Great Lakes Protection Fund Navigator program that AFT launched last year. And I have a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science and Biology from Otterbein University. Today, I'm going to be highlighting some key results from our needs assessment that we launched earlier this year, which we're using to guide information that we are providing through this webinar and additional tools trainings webinars. We want to start by identifying the demographic we reached with this needs assessment, which in part represents our webinar registrants today as well. As you can see, of the 128 responses to this question, the majority of people who completed the needs assessment were from government agencies and nonprofit organizations. Due to the nature of outcomes estimation work, this could be expected. Also, we will be able to compare these demographics with those who attend the tool training webinars in order to best categorize our overall outreach. We wanted to reach people who are specifically involved in outcomes estimation efforts, and thanks to Kinsey's poll, it seems like we are doing so, in order to gear the tools trainings to those who would be actively using them. However, we do not want to discount other folks who are simply interested in learning more, even if they are not actively quantifying outcomes at this time. As you can see, the majority of the people we reached are specifically the ones involved in farm conservation outcomes estimation efforts, as indicated by the dark green bar. And the next 2 majorities are those who are generally interested or associated with outcomes estimation efforts in their work. In addition to determining who was filling out this needs assessment, we also wanted to see what kinds of funding are supporting outcomes estimation in projects. This selection is also indicative of the types of program managers we reached with the needs assessment. The largest group we reached were the RCPP program managers, followed by those who selected other or wrote in, and then the EPA 319 non-point source program managers. The reason for this webinar, we were not originally planning to start with an overview of the OET guide. However, it seemed important when we realized that most of the people we were reaching with this assessment had not heard of the AFT Outcomes Estimations Tools Guide. In January of 2021, AFT hosted a webinar which saw 546 people registered and over 301 in attendance. And so later in this webinar, Michelle Perez and Aisha Tapras will be giving an overview of the guide to help ease readers into it. You'll see that the order of outcomes estimation tools we feature in this webinar series are influenced by the responses to this and additional questions from the needs assessment. Water quality has the greatest outcomes quantification interest, followed by economic outcomes and then social outcomes. These responses are also indicative of the individuals we reached with this needs assessment. We were unable to access the hundreds of new Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities project managers, as USDA could not share that contact information during the contract negotiation phase, but we anticipate interest in climate and GHG outcomes estimation tools will increase once we're able to reach them. Additionally, we are individually reviewing the other category, the common threads in the write-in responses related to soil health, water quantity, and various habitat metrics. Here we can see the majority of people who responded to the needs assessment are interested in project and watershed scale outcomes, quantification, followed by interest in field and farm scale outcomes quantification. This insight will be helpful for current and future tool developers to better understand what scale projects are interested in reporting outcomes on. The main takeaway from this graph is that a lot of people indicated they wanted support regarding all things outcomes quantification. The most commonly selected responses, represented by the green and dark blue bars, indicate that most respondents want help with just the basics, determining which tool, method, or model is right for them, and more specifically, which tool, method, or model will actually work in their area for their production systems or conservation practices. Here we wanted to evaluate the knowledge and overall usage of the tools discussed in the Outcomes Estimation Tools Guide. As you can see, indicated by the yellow bars, overall usage of these tools is low, but indicated by the dark blue bars, interest in learning more about them is very high. Here we want to highlight the tools that individuals were most interested in learning more about. We have geared this webinar series to begin with the tools that people indicated they were most interested in learning more about. Our upcoming webinars are Model My Watershed, Nutrient Tracking Tool, and Cover Crops Economics Tool. As shown by the dark blue bars, these were the top choices. Lastly, we wanted to acknowledge and thank those who are interested in helping the tool developers to improve their tools, because as we all know, no tool is perfect. All tools can be improved to cover more production systems, more conservation practices, and in some cases, more geographic areas. So again, thank you to those who indicated you'd be willing to collaborate with the tool developers to continually advance and improve outcomes quantification efforts.
Thank you, Julie. Well, now that you know the results of the needs assessment, I would like to give you a deep dive into how the Outcomes Estimation Tools webinar series came to be and what it will look like over the next 2 years. First off, let me introduce myself. I'm Aisha Tapp Ross, AFT's Water and Soil Health Scientist, located just outside Louisville, Kentucky. I have a master's in sustainability from the University of Louisville and am currently a PhD student in the biology department. My research focuses on soil microbial communities in conservation agriculture, specifically in relation to biochar amendments. I also own and run a small farmstead which produces vegetables, eggs, baked goods, and honey from our 40+ hives, all of which we sell at our local farmers market. While creating the Outcomes Estimations Tool Guide, Michelle Perez and then AFT New England Regional Deputy Director Emily Cole discovered that there were over 1,000 EPA and NRCS programs, such as RCPP, MRBI, and NWQI, with the potential for outcomes estimation needs. With the 2014 Farm Bill, Congress and NRCS started requiring that RCP project managers quantify the project outcomes, with the rationale that those who are able to effectively quantify and communicate the outcomes associated with the conservation practices may be able to accelerate practice adoption by other farmers. However, leaders of RCPP and other landscape scale projects struggle to quantify their project outcomes due to a lack of knowledge about which direct monitoring or indirect modeling estimation methods, models, or tools they should use. Thus, we hope our Outcomes Estimation Tools Guide would be helpful to all of these project managers, the majority of whom may be struggling. After the release of the OET Guide in November of 2020, AFT, led by Dr. Michelle Perez and Dr. Emily Cole, held a webinar launch and training on the guide in January 2021. Today, you'll be hearing a condensed version of that launch, but if you want a more detailed version of the webinar is available online. The participants of the OET Guide launch were given an exit survey, much like the one you will receive today. In that survey, we asked them, which of these next steps are you interested in? With the responses, hearing presentations by tool or method developers, having outcomes quantification coaching conversations with AFT, or helping to move report recommendations forward. 38% of respondents indicated that they were interested in C, helping to move recommendations forward. 39% indicated they were interested in B, having one-on-one outcomes quantification coaching conversations with AFT. And a majority of respondents, 60%, indicated that they would be interested in hearing presentations by tool or method developers. These responses helped guide our next steps into the development of this webinar series. We thus focused on connecting the tool developers with the project managers in the webinar series you are a part of today. Aside from the webinar series, we also provide some recommendations that you as the project managers can implement to make your experience with the tools more successful. The first recommendation is to connect with the tool developer, either to make sure the tool will work for you or seek training like this webinar series, or request an individual coaching session either with the tool developer or through AFT. If you cannot use existing tools, consider back of the envelope or other simple methods to estimate water quality and social outcomes. And finally, signal to NRCS, EPA, states, the foundation, and the sustainability supply chain communities that you need more guidance and support to quantify outcomes and want access to tools that are not yet operating in your area. We have also offered recommendations for the tool developers to implement that might make them more successful at supporting the possibly thousands of project managers to become users of their tools. With the project managers and tool developers working in tandem to improve the usability of the outcomes estimation tools and methods, we hope to bridge this knowledge gap and make outcomes estimations more accessible to those who need them. So we've been diligently scheduling tool developers to present over the next 2 years. Their appearance is in order of respondent interest, which was indicated in the needs assessment as Julie went over previously. The 2023 trainings will include Model My Watershed on June 7th, Nutrient Tracking Tool on July 5th, NRCS Cover Crop Economics Tool on August 2nd. September 6th is a TBD, meaning the tool developer has not yet confirmed that date, but hopefully these will be updated shortly. Then October 4th is the AFT Retrospective Soil Health Economics Tool, PTMAP Web Tool on November 1st, and another TBD in December. In 2024, we have the CIPES method and SIDMA tool on January 7th. This will be the only month where the webinar will be held on the second week of the month, since many of us are getting back from vacation on that first Wednesday. February and March will have the appearance of 2 new tools not originally included in the OET guide. These are the FAST GHD and the Cool Farm tool. Cover Crop Calculator will be April 3rd, Comet Farm and Comet Planner on May 1st, and the CAST tool on June 5th. We may also extend these dates if we discover new tools or methods from your responses to our webinar exit survey. So please make sure you fill those out.
Thank you, Aisha. That was excellent. Hi, everyone. It is an honor to be with you today. I'm Michelle Perez, and I'm AFT's Water Initiative Director and lead author of this guide. Aisha Tapp-Ross is joining me today to sub in for my co-author, Emily Cole, who is now the Executive Director of the Farm Service Agency for the state of Connecticut. I lead a terrific team who is trying to improve water resources and reduce agricultural non-point source pollution through a comprehensive water initiative with an emphasis on outcomes quantification, geographic targeting, and soil health economics. Before joining AFT, I worked at the World Resources Institute, the Environmental Working Group, and the Alliance to Save Energy. I have a PhD in environmental policy from the University of Maryland, and my dissertation was a 3-state comparative study of farm nutrient management regulations. Please enjoy perusing that on the Journal of Environmental Quality website. So in case you haven't seen the guide yet, here's the front cover, and you can download a copy for yourself using keyword search AFT Outcomes Tools. You can also order a free print copy to be mailed to you if you like having that paper copy around. I want to thank the funders of our report, the Walton Family Foundation, the Mosaic Foundation, and the Knight Foundation for making it possible. So regarding my time with you, I want to start off by providing an overview of the guide and share some definitions to make sure everyone's on the same page and explain why we undertook the research. Then I'll walk you through a few of the key tables and schematics listing the water quality, climate, social, and economic tools and compare and contrast a few tool features. Aisha will then share a few tips with you on how to use the guide to identify a tool or a method that might work for you. So what are project level outcomes and why should we try to quantify them? In our guide, we feature this definition of outcomes associated with farm conservation practice adoption, which is provided by the 5-page RCPP expectations document from the NRCS Regional Conservation Partnership Program in 2020. I'm going to read it aloud as it's a nice way to get us all on the same page. Outcomes are the measurable environmental, economic, and social impacts of RCPP activities. Examples of outcomes are pounds of nitrogen runoff avoided, tons of carbon sequestered, cost savings to producers, number of neighboring producers adopting a practice, decision factors leading to producer adoption of a soil health management system, etc. It's pretty good, right? Note that Emily and I did not endeavor to provide our own definitions of outcomes in the guide. Now on to the question of why quantify outcomes. Well, first of all, it is required by the RCPP in the 2014 and 2018 Farm Bills, and it is required by the EPA's Clean Water Act Section 319 projects. The announcement for public funding in 2014 for NRCS RCPP said they would prioritize, pardon me, project selection for the new RCPP program to those projects that promise to, quote, generate near-term results that are measurable from environmental, economic, and social perspectives. The 2018 Farm Bill refined statutory language further by requiring RCP projects to conduct an assessment of the progress made to achieve conservation benefits and report on the outcomes at the conclusion of the project. And it's not just those RCPP and EPA projects that are important here. You saw this slide from Aisha earlier. We tried to come up with an estimate of how many farm conservation projects are out there. And one lowball estimate was mostly water quality oriented projects with 1,000. Topping the list are 600 ag-oriented EPA 319 projects, 400 RCPP projects, and about 60 Mississippi River Basin Healthy Watersheds Initiatives or MRBI projects. But who knows how many other projects are out there that are primarily state-led, county-led, corporate-led, and we hope to have reached the 100 or so Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities leaders to invite them to complete this needs assessment or register for the webinar because they are too required to monitor climate and other co-benefits, and we hope to get that contact list soon and have them catch up with us. And of course, a lot of these projects may be double or even triple counted because they receive funding from multiple sources. So the bottom line here is there is a lot of project level farm conservation effort going on that could be doing more on outcomes quantification. And so with a lot of different projects underway, aside from the regulatory drivers driving some of the projects, there are many good reasons to quantify outcomes. First, conservationists can provide farmers who are already using conservation practices with quantitative estimates of the environmental and economic outcomes they're already experiencing and offering to society. Second, with that information, conservationists could infuse their existing education and outreach activities aimed at farmers who are on the fence about conservation with these quantitative findings from the farmers already using the practices and likely making those events even more exciting and more effective. Third, once interest has been piqued, conservationists may be able to work with those on the fence farmers to improve conservation decision-making and help them get to yes faster by running what-if conservation scenarios that just generate estimates of potential future outcomes associated with investment in conservation. Fourth, we believe conservationists should produce aggregated and cumulative estimates of the environmental results being achieved by farmer participation in their government-funded conservation projects and report those results to the public. And fifth, conservationists can assist farmers in evaluating credit generation opportunities for participation in emerging water quality or climate markets. And although this is not an exhaustive list of terrific reasons to quantify outcomes, our last item points to the importance of evaluating individual and aggregated environmental and economic results of farmer participation in corporate sustainability supply chain programs. So one primary goal of this outcomes estimation tools guide is to empower and enable our fellow conservationists to add more outcomes quantification to their conservation toolbox. Already in the toolbox are education and outreach events and materials, financial assistance, and technical assistance. Just imagine how much more effective we all might be if we added outcomes quantification to the toolbox as well. Well, that's exactly what we're envisioning, a self-strengthening cycle where outcomes quantification leads to more conservation adoption. In this self-strengthening cycle, farm conservation project managers provide FA, TA, education and outreach, outcomes quantification services to their farmers in the project area. Farmers respond favorably by adopting conservation practices promoted by the project managers. More quantification and dissemination of the environmental, social, and economic outcomes of those practices occurs. This inspires more farmers and gives them more confidence that they need to adopt more conservation practices. And over time, land scale improvements begin to occur, such as improved water quality, greater resilience to climate change, and more prosperous farms. This guide began in earnest more than 7 years ago when AFT ourselves landed an RCP project in the Illinois Upper Macoupin Creek watershed. We took the requirement to quantify outcomes seriously and conducted a review of a handful of models and tools that might work for us, our staff, our partners, and our budget in that watershed. And as we detail in the report, our experience learning how to define outcomes, let alone how to quantify and report them, has been painful. Other colleagues at AFT encouraged me to share what we learned with our internal exercise with others so as to help minimize the pain and suffering of our fellow conservationists. And with the help of Dr. Emily Cole, we cast the net wider than my initial effort, and we are pleased to share these findings with you today. Regarding the scope and scale of our effort, we focus solely on water quality, greenhouse gas, social, and economic outcomes. We chose to exclude tools and methods that enable outcomes quantification for water quantity, air quality, and wildlife. We also restricted our analysis to modeling estimation approaches to outcomes quantification rather than direct monitoring approaches. We stopped short of a full-fledged evaluation of the tools and methods because neither Dr. Cole nor I are modelers ourselves. To find models, methods, and tools to review, we cast the net wide by conducting literature searches in peer-reviewed journals. We asked friends and colleagues at NRCS, EPA, and other institutions, and we conducted an informal survey of watershed project managers to find out which tools or methods they were using to quantify outcomes. It is important to note that we focused our interviews on tool developers rather than searching for and interviewing tool users. Please see the acknowledgement section of the report for a list of the many wonderful persons that reviewed our report and made it stronger. And for links to papers we reviewed and conducted comparative analysis of models and tools on, see Appendix A. We share a good number of resources in Appendix B for projects interested in conducting monitoring in streams, at the edge of the field, in tile drains, and conducting soil health monitoring. And in Appendix C, you'll see summaries of the 18 tools we reviewed, but found did not satisfy all our criteria. Nevertheless, those may be perfectly valid tools for other project needs, so check it out. And in Appendix D, you'll find summaries of the 17 models we excluded because they did not satisfy our criteria. And again, could be perfectly useful models to quantify outcomes if you have the staff expertise on hand or a budget to hire partners to do that outcomes quantification for your project. So to figure out which tools to feature and which ones to mention in the appendices, we established 5 criteria to help us decide. First and foremost, we wanted tools that generate quantitative estimates of water quality, climate, social, and economic outcomes associated with ag conservation practice adoption. So, as you can imagine, index tools were excluded. Second, the tools or methods needed to be evaluated, needed to be available to the public, either for free or for a fee. Third, we wanted tools to be built for use by conservationists or farmers. We fourth wanted to make sure that our fellow conservationists leading these many RCPP and other projects did not have to be computer modeling experts to use the tools. And finally, simply for expediency's sake, we decided to exclude tools that are only available in one state, even if it satisfied all the other criteria, just so we could finish the report. So without further ado, here are 14 tools and 2 methods that we selected because they satisfied our criteria amongst the 51 models, tools, and methods that we reviewed. We have table 1 featuring all 14 tools and 2 methods, 7 water quality tools in 1 method, 3 climate tools, 1 social tool in 1 method, and 3 economic tools. First things first, we have had 1 name change since we initially published this report 3 years ago. EPA's Step L tool has changed its name to PLET, the Pollution Load Estimation Tool, and now it's a web-based tool. And the EPA Region 5 tool has officially been discontinued. So we're down by 1 water quality tool, and so it's just 6 water quality tools and 13 tools overall. Third, you may be wondering what the heck is the difference between a tool and a method? Well, we defined a tool as a technical device intended to make the task of estimating outcomes easier. And in contrast, we defined a method as a systematic procedure for accomplishing the task of estimating outcomes. All right, so let me ease you into this slide, into this table featuring the water quality outcomes quantification tools. First, we display the tools that are available for use nationally. Step L, now called PLET by EPA, is no longer Excel-based, but it's a web-based tool. Nutrient Tracking Tool and Model My Watershed are also web-based tools. Then we displayed 3 regional tools that are all web-based. PTM Map is available for use in Minnesota and North Dakota. The CAST tool is available in the Chesapeake Bay, while Field Doc is also available in the Chesapeake, but also Delaware Bays and Western Pennsylvania. One tip to point out is that the names of all the tools in this and similar tables are hot links. So if you click on, say, Nutrient Tracking Tool, you'll jump immediately to the NTT tool website where you can start exploring the tool and all the associated resources offered there. Now, on the scale and the purpose column, we categorize primary as the scale at which the tool was initially built to work at, and secondary as an additional scale at which the tool can also be used. We use the term field scale for tools built to work with individual farmers to analyze their current or future adoption of conservation practices. Project scale refers to tools that estimate outcomes associated with the project boundary, which could be a watershed or a county. And in terms of watershed scale, that's a term used for projects attempting to improve water quality of a specific water body within a watershed. So the Step L, now called PLET tool, was initially built to help 319 project managers, and everyone can use it, not just 319 folks, to assess their project scale water quality outcomes that are watershed based. Users can also use PLET to estimate generalized field scale outcomes. In contrast, Nutrient Tracking Tool was developed primarily to assess individualized farm field water quality losses before and after conservation practice adoption, but it can be used as a project or a watershed scale tool too. Model My Watershed by the Stroud Center offers water quality analysis at the project and the watershed scale. So the final column lists the water quality outcomes that are quantified by the tool and the degree of specificity with which the tool estimates those outcomes. We use the term field specific for tools that require farmer production and management data inputs and generate outcomes applicable to the fields being analyzed. Tools with site-specific analytical capabilities offer location-based environmental data sets for soils, slopes, and weather, and generate outcomes applicable to that specific location. The majority of tools require watershed scale or county scale data inputs to produce generalized estimates of outcomes applicable to that watershed or that county of interest. So, Nutrient Tracking Tool is the only water quality tool that provides field-specific and site-specific water quality outcomes estimates because it requires farmer management information and it benefits from location-specific environmental data sets built into its underlying model. The rest of the water quality tools yield generalized estimates of water quality outcomes because they don't ask for field-specific inputs from farmers, and they most rely on larger scale environmental data sets. When AFT was exploring 3 years ago how we were going to quantify our RCPP project water quality outcomes, we developed a method we lovingly refer to as this back of the envelope method. Our own Dr. Emily Bruner, AFT's Midwest Science Director, who is now with the Soil Health Institute, then formalized this method for use with the Illinois STAR Initiative, which stands for Saving Tomorrow's Agricultural Resources, and she produced a 3-page methodology. Projects that want to estimate project scale aggregated water quality outcomes can check to see if this method will work for you. And we've invited Jean Brokish, Deputy Director of AFT's Midwest team, to be our final speaker today to walk you through this back of the envelope method and to show you how our new Excel-based tool that does the work for you in the state of Illinois. 2 requirements for using this method include the need to attain baseline nutrient and sediment loss information for your county or watershed, and reduction efficiency values for the conservation practices your project farmers are adopting. And then with a little bit of math, multiplication, addition, voila, you'll generate a reasonable course estimate of your project's nutrient and sediment reduction outcomes. Here are the 3 climate outcome estimation tools that satisfied our criteria. Comet Farm and Comet Planner are tools developed by NRCS and Colorado State University, while FieldPrint Platform is developed by Field to Market. All 3 are web-based tools. Comet Planner offers the quickest generalized estimate of GHG reductions from conservation practice adoption at the county or the state level, as results can be produced in just a few minutes with as little as 4 clicks to respond to the required 4 questions. Comet Farm and Comet FieldPrint Platform provide field-specific and site-specific estimates of the GHG outcomes listed in either metric tons or pounds of CO2 equivalent, but that requires interest and cooperation from farmers to share their production and management data in order to generate the field-specific estimates of outcomes. All right, now moving on to the economic outcomes. Here is an excerpt of the definition of economic outcomes provided by NRCS RCPP expectations document. It stated that the economic indicators can quantify the financial impacts of conservation practices on a farm, ranch, or forest land, and the document provided the following 3 examples: conservation cost effectiveness, economic or financial benefit, valuation of ecosystem benefits. Here are the 3 economic outcomes estimation tools we found that satisfied our criteria. All are Excel-based tools, and the first 2 by NRCS and AFT, the Cover Crops Economics tool and the Retrospective Soil Health Economic Calculator, are available for use nationally, while the third tool, the Cropping Systems Calculator by the Land Stewardship Program, is restricted for use in Wisconsin and Illinois. All 3 economic tools provide analyses of the costs and benefits associated with cover crops, while the AFT RSHEC tool can analyze additional practices, such as alternative tillage and nutrient management for row crops, plus mulching and compost application for almond production. The LSP CCS tool can analyze conservation crop rotation and grazing practices as well. And as stated in the final column, the quantitative economic outcomes are similar amongst the 3 tools, though a little different as well. All right, I got a couple more slides more. Last but not least, we've come to the social tool and method section. The social indicators data management and analysis tool, or SIDMA, was developed by Purdue and Michigan State Universities in collaboration with EPA Region 5 staff. The tool assists watershed project managers in survey generation and helps them conduct the results and conduct analyses, code the results, and conduct the analyses of the social indicators that can be collected at different phases of the project. The tool is based on the SIPPES Handbook, which stands for Social Indicators, Planning and Evaluation Systems for Non-Point Source Management, a handbook for watershed projects, or SIPPES. We refer to the SIPPES Handbook as the social methodology in our report, as it offers guidance to project managers on how to plan projects and evaluate the effects of those project interventions, such as outreach activities and other events, how well those are having an effect on farmers in the project. And beyond the SIGMA tool, we've taken the guidance from the CIPES handbook and developed our own social surveys using MS Forms or other free online survey sites, though there's no guardrails nor nifty analytical features that SIGMA offers when you do it yourself. And here's the definition of social outcomes that we feature from the 2011 CIPES handbook. Social outcomes are social changes needed to bring about and sustain the environmental conditions you are trying to achieve in your project area. Examples of social outcomes provided by the CIPES include increased awareness, changed attitudes, reduced constraints, increased capacity, increased adoption of practices, and the like. You can read more about these social outcomes and how to quantify them on page 55 of the CIPES handbook. And now it's my great pleasure to turn you all over to Aisha to take us home.
Well, thanks, Michelle. One difficulty that Michelle already highlighted is how to whittle down the many options available in order to then evaluate a few options more closely. So I'm going to take a few minutes now to walk you through some schematics and tables from the guide that compare and contrast key tool characteristics to help you narrow down your options. The first of which is figure 11, titled, "What purpose did the tool developer initially build the tool to satisfy?" This schematic was designed to help users distinguish the where and what these tools are used for. Moving to the top of the figure, the position within the figure indicates the scale the tool was designed for. The left-hand side indicates that these tools were developed for the field or farm level versus larger project scales on the right-hand side. And those in the center can do both. If you look below to the legend, the colors indicate what the tool quantifies: economics, greenhouse gas, social, or water quality outcomes. You'll notice that all three economic tools are field or farm focused. The social tool and method are project focused. However, they are collecting individual farm or farmer information. Whereas Step L, now called PLET, Field Doc, and PTM app, located here in the middle of the schematic, all have the capability to estimate a single project location and compile outcomes of multiple locations. There are two additional features to point out. First, the long arrows indicate either documented use, the solid arrow, or potential use, the dotted arrow, of this tool at additional scales. And lastly, the calculator symbol indicates that in order to track project outcomes, external summation by the user is required. Next, I'll walk you through table 3, getting into the tool, getting started, and getting to the finish line. This table provides some foundational information regarding the access and data requirements for the featured tools and methods. First is the tool column. Below each tool name is a live link that will move you to the write-up for that tool. Next, getting in. This is how to access the tool or method, whether you need to download a program, sign up for an account, or access via web. And next is getting started. This column provides a snapshot into the first few steps that a user will need to complete to begin quantifying desired outcomes. And last, the getting to the finish line column shows a qualitative scale representing the relative number of steps it would take from start to finish to quantify outcomes. We base the scale on the adoption of cover crops as an example. Again, I would suggest reviewing the guide questions in the Choosing Tools section of this guide to assist in planning your outcomes quantification journey. Do project staff and farmers have the time to gather and process data? Some tools require a significant amount of data that may not be a possibility for your project. See that these 3 tools require some form of farmer interview or access to detailed management information to proceed with their tools. Do project staff have access to additional necessary data? Tools such as Step L, now PLET, have an input data server accessible online to provide access to location-based input data, while others require that data to be sourced by the user. Understanding what data is required for each tool will also help you find one best suited to your project needs. How experienced are project staff at using models and tools and in interpreting input and results data? To reinforce something that Michelle spoke of earlier, we wanted to ensure that our fellow conservationists did not have to be computer modelers to use the tools featured in this guide. If you do have staff with that expertise, or if you have funding for external consultants to work on quantification, then there are additional options you could consider, many of which can be found in Appendix C or D. Zooming in on the top of this table, you can see the range of relative steps involved within the WQ tools. You'll notice that the one field-specific water quality tool, NTT, is rated as a 5 because it requires the highest number of steps in the process to achieve a farmer-specific and site-specific water quality outcome estimate. In contrast, we rated the other tools as 2s and 3s, as they do not require attainment of farmer-specific information. Tools such as Step L or PLET, Model My Watershed, and CAST tool require fewer steps, but keep in mind, we'll provide generalized outcomes estimation. These schematics provide some important tool characteristics, but once you are ready to learn more about a specific tool, you can use the live links to take you directly to the more in-depth write-ups. I'm going to walk you through one now. Sorry. Oh yeah, okay. The 14 tools and 2 methods descriptions begin on page 29 of the guide, with each of the 14 tool descriptions following the same format that is noted here. Beginning in section A with an overview and tool background, then section B describes the required inputs and analysis options of each tool. Next, in C, it details the specific outcomes quantified by the tool, and D highlights strengths and limitations. In E, we provide examples of other conservation projects that have used this tool for quantifying project outcomes, and then each write-up ends with additional supporting and logistical information. I'll walk you through these sections in a little more detail now. So each tool write-up begins with a summary description. This section answers the set of questions on the left, including background on the tool, who developed this tool and for what purpose and scale, who the developers are, tool availability, and intended users. Also, does this tool quantify project scale outcomes? How do you access it? Where geographically can it be used? And can you use this for what-if scenarios? Then in section B, there are more tool specifics, such as what is the underlying model that this tool is built upon? What data or data sets does it use? And is that data readily accessible to the user? This section also describes the conservation practices that this tool can estimate outcomes for. If your project is focused on the adoption of BMPs within animal agriculture, section B is a great place to ensure that a tool will work for your project. Moving along to section C, here you will find descriptions of the outcomes that are quantified by each tool, such as NNP loading for the water quality tools, along with the specificity of those outcomes, and if confidence intervals are provided by the tool. Also, the units and how the tool presents these outcomes to the user in tabular form, graphical, or both are detailed here. Now in section D, we highlight some of each tool's strengths and limitations, including helpful features such as map-based interface, like several of the included tools have. This section may also note when there may be a significant amount of external data collection required to use the tool. If the user can download the results easily, and if the tool has been reviewed in some manner. Through our own research or through our conversations with the developers, we describe other projects that have used this particular tool in their own outcomes quantification. Here in section E, highlighting project partners' location in the estimated outcomes of their project that were quantified with this tool, as we only included tools that were meant for use by conservationists and/or farmers. We work to include examples of our fellow conservationists using them in their project results when available. Finally, in section F, you will find logistical information such as the most recent version or updates to the tool, web links to the tool's homepages, user guides, training, and any other relevant materials. Also included in this section is a point of contact for each tool so that users or potential users can have a first point of contact if needed for questions, issues, etc. And now I'll send it back to Michelle.
Thank you, Aisha. We hope this walkthrough of some key tables and schematics and the Outcomes Estimation Tools Guide helped ease you into the report and provided useful information to you. And before we turn things over to Jean, we've got one more slide to outline options for what's next. So here are some suggested next steps in our collective outcomes quantification journey. We look forward to you joining us at some or all of the next set of tools training webinars that will be held the first Wednesday of every month. And if you can't make it, but you want to view the session, the recording should be available by the following Monday. Please share your feedback with us on this webinar by answering a quick 7-question survey. Kinsey shared the link in the chat box at the beginning of the session, and it'll also appear as a new tab in your internet browser when the webinar ends. It'll take just a couple of minutes to share your feedback. We're also offering free coaching sessions to the first 10 farm conservation project managers who want to secure a session with us to help you figure out which tool or method might be right for your project. If you're interested, just email Aisha Ross and use the subject line coaching request. And finally, if you'd like a preprint copy of the guide to be mailed to you, please place that order online at the reports website, which you can easily find again using keywords AFT outcomes tools. All right, I'm gonna turn you over to Jean for a walkthrough of that STAR back of the envelope method and a sneak peek at a draft project by county outcomes calculator tool, fondly referred to as the Peacock tool. Jean, take it away.
Awesome, thank you, Michelle. A little bit of information about me on the screen there, but I think actually Kinsey or Julie, we're gonna switch and have me do the screen share. If I can maybe try pulling that up here, just make that switch. All right, is that looking okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. All right, so so I am Jean Brokish. I'm the Midwest Deputy Director for American Farmland Trust. And on the previous slide, which I already took down, a little bit about me. I grew up on a Wisconsin dairy farm. Oops. I have a bachelor's of science in agronomy and a MS in soil science, both from great Midwestern universities. But my agricultural career has included living and working in 7 different states and 1 international country, 1 international location in Southern Africa. So for the next 15 minutes, I'll be sharing information on how the outcomes estimation tools have been put into action, including walking through the STAR method and its evolution. And just, remind everybody of the goal really was to transform the practices into water quality and climate outcomes. So we have developed what we think is a pretty cool tool that will allow project managers to do this. And today, not only is this the kickoff of this whole webinar series, but this is also the world premiere of the tool. And I'll be running through its origin, data assembly and analysis, the process we use to kind of transform it into this user-friendly platform, and I'll wrap up with a short demonstration. So Michelle mentioned a little bit already, kind of the STAR method that is described in Figure 12 of the Outcomes Estimation Tool report. And it was originally developed by AFT's Midwest Science Director to help us estimate the benefits of those practices implemented through MRBI and RCPP funded projects in our Upper Macoupin Creek watershed. It was then expanded for statewide application and use by STAR. And again, this is just a real simple back of the envelope calculation, and it really just provided a summary of water quality and climate benefits. But first, a little bit of a disclosure statement. I think the report does a good job of kind of acknowledging the strengths and limitations of each tool. And so with the STAR method and its evolution into what we're calling Peacock, there are some strengths and weaknesses or limitations. So, on this chart just kind of outlines those. One of the strengths that we think is just, it's simple math. Pretty much anybody can do this who has an 8th grade education in algebra. There's not a complex analysis or any regressions or anything like that involved. The data input is publicly available, and it's expandable. If you have the data, if you have the right data, of course, you can determine outcomes for multiple practices. So primarily the key data points are determining those base loads and the reduction coefficients of the practices, which I'll explain a little bit in a moment. Limitations, the math may be a little too simple, actually. And one of the things that we acknowledge is that if there's a field that has multiple practices on it, it is actually overestimating those benefits of those stacked practices. And it's currently limited in the number of practices that where we have the data. So we currently have it built for cover crops and reduced or no-till. I think we have enough data to integrate nutrient management into it, but there's other things that may be used in your project that the data may not be fully available yet. And I also just want to acknowledge that right now we have built this tool for Illinois. It could be adapted to other states, but again, that's all subject to having the right data available. So I'm going to read through the data inputs and what goes into STAR and now the Peacock. So first, the very first step is to just establish those baseline loads in the county. So for nutrients, we used water quality data for the Huck 8 watershed. This was data that was found and reported in the nutrient loss reduction strategy for Illinois. And we did some math and combined that with cropland acres reported by NASS. The second, kind of baseline data point was just sediment to figure out what the erosion rates, how much sediment was actually being delivered to streams before any practice implementation. And we used the tillage transect data that was available from the Illinois Department of Agriculture for that. The second step then is to tally those practices implemented. So this would be the user input. This is the acres of cover crops or the acres of no-till that you are supporting through your project. And then figuring out what the impact of those practices are. So we utilize Comet Planner to estimate the greenhouse gas reductions. And we looked at the nutrient loss reduction strategy and SARE, which is the Sustainable Ag Research and Education program of USDA, to figure out what is the effect of those practices? How able are those practices to actually reduce the nutrient and sediment loads? And we just call those or refer to those as those removal efficiencies or reduction coefficients. All data sources are publicly available except the acres for the various practices installed. And so you as project manager would know that. And then all data in this case was at the county level except for those Huck 8 nutrient loads, which were determined using a combination of the watershed data and the cropland acres in each county to come up with a weighted average. And this slide just kind of illustrates that conversion from the watershed basis to the county level. We used GIS analysis to determine a weighted average based on the portion of the county in each watershed. So this map shows our analysis from McLean County in central Illinois. And the graphic on the right there basically carves up the county into 4 watersheds noted with the numbers. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 there. And then the table inset below that is a list of the watersheds and the portions. So 1 corresponds to Vermilion, 2 corresponds to the Mackinac, 3 to the Salt, and 4 to the Upper Sangamon watersheds. And you can see here that in McLean County, the majority of the county is either in Mackinac or Salt watersheds, as noted with number 2 and 3 on the map. And then there's lesser amounts of the county falling into the areas marked with 1 for Vermilion and 4 for the Upper Sangamon watershed. Then once we had that kind of just footprint, then we did the determine the weighted average by taking the percentage of the watershed times the cropland acres, which gave us crop acres in each Huck 8 watershed, multiplied those acres by the nutrient loading determined in those watersheds, and then we summed that all together and divided by the total cropland acres in the county to get an average per acre load for the county. So this was just kind of a simple GIS analysis to determine that weighted average for each county and converting it again from that watershed quantity to the county. So here's kind of how the data inputs would look for Alexander County, which is in far southern Illinois. So we start again taking that weighted average from the previous slide, and we determined that there was nitrate nitrogen load of 2.41 pounds per acre and a total phosphorus load of 0.67 pounds per acre. The sediment load based on that tillage transect data for Alexander County is 4.93 tons per acre. And then this would be the user input, so in this case, we're just going to say 1,200 acres of cover crops were applied through this project. We also, as I mentioned, have the data for tillage, so this could be tillage as well. But just for simplicity today, we'll focus on cover crops. And per Comet Planner, then the greenhouse gas reductions for a non-legume cover crop has a reduction coefficient of 0.42 metric tons of CO2e per acre. And per nutrient loss reduction strategy and SARE, those are the two sources I mentioned for that. The reduction coefficients for nitrate, nitrogen, and phosphorus are both 0.3, meaning that if you have whatever your baseline is and you apply cover crops, you're reducing the nitrate nitrogen contribution by 30%. And then SARE data and analysis, we took the sediment, we used the SARE data analysis to determine the sediment reduction coefficient of 0.4. The data and literature indicate range somewhere between 0.2 and 0.9, and we kind of looked at what made the most sense for Illinois and took a conservative estimate of 0.4 there. So just walking through the calculations using that data, again, this is just simple algebra. We have our 2.41 pounds of nitrate nitrogen loss per acre times our 1,200 acres of cover crops times our 30% reduction coefficient gets us 868 pounds of nitrate nitrogen reduced. Phosphorus, we start with our 0.67 pounds of phosphorus per acre times our 1,200 acres times our 30% reduction, and we have 241 pounds of total phosphorus reduced. For sediment, our starting point is 4.93 tons of sediment loss per acre year, 1,200 acres of cover crops again, and our 40% reduction coefficient. And we have our 2,366 tons of sediment reduced. And then greenhouse gas, there's no baseline here. The Comet Planner doesn't quantify what the existing is. It just quantifies what the change in practice creates and what the relative reduction is. So here we don't have a baseline number, but we assume 1,200 acres of non-legume cover crops, and we use that 0.42 metric tons of CO2e reduction factor to come up with 504 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents reduced through the implementation of those 1,200 acres. So all these equations can be done in Excel, and that's how we initially did it. But our team, thought, well, we can do better than that. We can integrate it into Excel. And out of that process arose what we have been calling for fun is just Peacock, the Project by County Outcomes Calculator. And again, this is Excel based. So the background analysis and data integration was all done, and we really created kind of a plug and chug format where the user input is really just limited to county and practice quantity. And I'm going to demonstrate our Peacock soon, but first, just encourage you to kind of ask yourself a few questions. And we're really looking, we've kind of rolled this out for Illinois, or we're premiering it today, and we hope to do some engagement and application within Illinois. But we're also really interested from anyone on this call, would you use a tool like this? For what other practices would you be interested in estimating outcomes? Again, I mentioned it currently can handle no-till and cover crops. I think there's a good body of data available for nutrient management, buffers, and it could be possible through Comet Planner to distinguish between a legume and a non-legume cover crop, if that's helpful. Are you interested in taking this for a test run and giving us some feedback on it? And would a corresponding PWAC be useful? And PWAC being Project by Watershed Outcomes Calculator, where we could take some of that county level data and reverse engineer that weighted average to come up with a watershed basis. So depending on how your projects are coordinated, are you reporting more on county level or reporting on watershed level? And again, recognizing this is built for Illinois. If you're not in Illinois, we're interested in working with you, and thinking about how we can build this for other states. So is that baseline data available in your state? Primarily figuring out what those baseline nutrient loads and sediment loads are. And is there the equivalent of the nutrient loss reduction strategy or some sort of on the ground research that would help us determine what those reduction coefficients are? And so if you are interested and willing to work with us to build something for your state, you can email me, reach out, and be happy to work with you and see what opportunities exist. Lastly, I want to give credit to our production team here and worked together with Michelle Perez, who just presented, of course, but we also had Dr. Bonnie McGill, AFT's Senior Climate and Soil Health Scientist, and Ellen Yeatman, our Ag Economist and Water Research Manager. So the four of us put our heads together and came up with this Excel document, which I'm going to walk through, shift to now and walk through some features. So I'm thinking, you all should be able to see the Excel file now. And I think I probably have about 5 minutes to run through this and before we shift to questions, which should be enough time. I'll just start by saying right now, again, this is strictly Excel based where we have different tabs where we've gathered some of the data. So we have our Huck 8 watershed basis, we have our erosion rates down here, we have our nitrogen and phosphorus loads, et cetera. But what we see for you as the user interface would just be this one page here where just the yellow shaded cells would be for the data entry. And it's created as kind of a drop down. So all of the counties in Illinois are listed alphabetically here. So just carrying through my sample math, I'm going to choose Alexander County and I'm going to say that there's 1,200 acres of cover crops. Scrolling down, then it gives me a table of what the nitrogen reduction is from those cover crops, what the phosphorus reduction is, what the sediment reduction is, and those greenhouse gas emissions. You can see there's a corresponding line for no-till. If we were to say, okay, we had 800 acres of no-till as well in the county, those numbers would populate based on the reduction coefficients of no-till or strip-till. We can choose up to 14 counties. So if you're also, let's say in, let's choose McLean, because I used that as my example here. If I can spell McLean, went right by it, there it is. We'll choose that and we'll say that there's, 5,000 acres of cover crops and 4,000 acres of no-till, strip-till. You can see the tallies here. Update in terms of what the overall acres that were implemented through your project. We have still a county by county summary of the outcomes for those practices. We have the total outcomes, and then we also have built in something here where these tables can automatically create kind of a very simple graph. So you can see then through these two counties, a total of 22,000 pounds of nitrate nitrogen was reduced, and a total of about 2,500 pounds of phosphorus. And these are color coded to show what was attributed to the cover crop and what was attributed to the no-till or strip-till. The the table here then has the sediment numbers and the portions to cover crops and tillage. And then this last table shows the greenhouse gas reductions that are attributed to those practices. So again, the numbers are summarized here, and we're just kind of thinking this is a really nice plug and chug, simple graphical way for people to report on some of those environmental benefits of their practices. We also have, so I mentioned this table, this sheet is limited to like 14 counties selection. For projects that are statewide, we also have a table in here for all 102 counties in Illinois, where you could, if you had another table with all of the deeds, you could just simply copy and paste the acres, or you could go through and say, okay, in Alexander County, we have 1,200 acres of cover crops. And down here in McLean, I already forgot the numbers I used before, but you can fill it in this way too. And this would allow you to select more than 14 counties, and it has the same table summary graphs down below. So it's kind of what it looks like. We're thinking of embellishing this a little bit and making this maybe a little bit more user-friendly, but looking for some feedback on it and some test drivers. So those questions are all available to you. And I think that concludes my world premiere of the Peacock tool. And happy to pitch it back to you, Michelle, for any questions or feedback or follow-up.
Thank you, Jean. That was fantastic. So thank you to everybody, all of you who joined us today and stayed till the end. We have, more than 15 minutes. If you can stay with us for questions, go ahead and type them in. If you have to leave, please take that survey with you. Find it in the chat box, and it's just 6 minutes or 7 questions and 2 minutes, but go ahead and it's your turn now to ask us some questions, provide us with comments, and vote up the results.
Okay, I'll ask a couple questions just to maybe people are, thinking of some questions. So, Jean, where do you find the Peacock tool if somebody wanted to use that?
Well, right now, we've not distributed it, but I think that's our next discussion is figuring out how to put it on the AFT website, and something that they could download and basically use a copy from their desktop. We have yet to lock all of those other data points on the spreadsheet, so we want to do that before we release it out into the world, because it'd be horrible if somebody started using it and then overwrit the data or deleted it and it wasn't working for them. So we want to do that, but I think that's something we could probably do yet in the next couple weeks, especially if there are people who are interested in taking it for a test drive, knowing that this is a work in progress still. We're looking for feedback on how to improve it too.
Awesome, thanks. And is there currently any plans in the workplace to expand outside of Illinois either, or are you really looking for people?
Well, we have AFT has a project in Wisconsin, and so we will be, that's next on our list, and we're currently gathering some of the data for Wisconsin. We know, I mentioned a number of times the nutrient loss reduction strategy, and that, for folks who may not be familiar, is the plans that all of the states in the Mississippi River Basin had to create in response to the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, or the hypoxic zone in the Gulf of Mexico. So a lot of those states within the Mississippi River Basin have very similar data to what we found for Illinois. So we see that as kind of like the third layer is, looking at Iowa, Indiana, Minnesota, Missouri. Data should be pretty accessible, and it should be in a very similar format to what we found for Illinois. So yes, we are definitely on a projection to release this peacock and let it go fly out there, even though I know that peacocks really don't fly that well. They just kind of float around with their feathers sticking up. But we do want to expand it, and we really are looking for people who want to test it out. But also, like, if you're in California and you think, wow, I'd like to think about how this could be created for my state, you can work with us and help us find the data for your state. And once we have that data, we can integrate it into the same type of format or process that we've used.
Great, thanks, Jean. There is a question in the chat here. If you want to help farmers make decisions about which BNPs are most effective for specific fields, do models with generalized outcomes estimates only provide any value?
I can try to take a crack at this. Hi, John Winston. If this is AFT's longtime friend from Winrock, is this a rhetorical question? Because, with your expertise, you can feel free to answer your own question. But yeah, I think it's a trade-off. Farmers do want information that is very tailored to their farms, their fields, their management data, their soil slopes and weather. But a lot of times they are so busy, and so they don't want to take the time to share their management information, share what they were doing before, share what they're doing after, to come up with those more site-specific and field-specific outcomes estimates. So they recognize the trade-off too. We each are, very ambitious in our level of outcome specificity, but we acknowledge that it comes with the cost of time and data. So with that trade-off in mind, I think a lot of farmers are willing to entertain conversations about generalized estimates. That is good enough for them. But of course, you've got that special farmer who's got the time and the data. You can head straight for the field-specific and farm-specific outcomes tools. Anybody else has anything to offer to that?
No, I think you covered it. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, for sure. And John, we also were surprised that only one model was very field specific. Of course, that's one tool, right? So there are many more field specific models that you'll find in Appendix C and D, but those will require far more experienced persons with modeling expertise to run. So you might find lots more field specific models and tools that are interesting to you and your staff if you have that expertise or you have a budget to hire that expertise. Thanks.
And Michelle, I think this kind of goes along with it. Do you have any plans to update the guide in future years and kind of expand, get more tools involved? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, Aisha is itching to do new write-ups of the two tools that we totally forgot about when we published this report, the FAST GHG tool that was developed out of Cornell University, and the Cool Farm tool, which began as mostly a European-oriented tool that is now increasingly being used in the US. So as soon as this chapter of our work is underway, Aisha is going to lead that effort to create those write-ups, and we'll somehow figure out how to provide amendments to the tool guide. And so we welcome all of you to get in touch with us if we're still missing more tools that need to be featured either in the full report, in Appendix C or Appendix D. We count on you, our fellow conservationists, to let us know.
Great, thank you. We have another question. Will this PowerPoint be made available? And the answer is yes.
Exactly. Along with the recording, which should be available no later than Monday, we are going to share out the slide deck so you can study them yourselves, so that you can use them yourselves. We value you as fellow members of the conservation community, and we want to empower you with all the resources.
Michelle, it may be possible. We have to work with our other team members on the Peacock, but it may be possible that we could have a public access point for the Peacock spreadsheet at that point as well.
Excellent.
Do the follow-up.
Thank you. Yes.
And yes, there will be a follow-up email. Can you send a follow-up email with those two tools you just mentioned that were not in the guide?
Yes, I mean, so they are already on the schedule that you can see from the slides Aisha presented, and they're already on our website that provides the schedule, the website that you saw when you registered. So that day is coming for those FAST GHG tool and Cool Farm tool, but in terms of the write-ups for those tool, we're not sure when that's going to happen, but we will make sure everybody who registered and attended this webinar knows when that is being released. We'll know that you are an eager consumer of that information. you know, nothing's stopping you right now from using your internet browser to go check out those tools and see if they're going to be useful to you.
Great. Is there anybody else out there that has any questions?
I would like to say I've actually received some questions over email about the coaching sessions. So I am putting my email in the chat again. So if anybody is interested in one-on-one coaching sessions with Michelle and I, we have you fill out a survey prior to an hour-long coaching session where we sit down and discuss your individual outcomes estimation tools needs and walk you through what tools would be best for you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Aisha.
Yeah, thank you, Aisha. There is another question in the Q&A, and it says, thanks for the informative webinar assessing the different tools for use in Hawaii as a project and watershed scale. We confront a lot of severe data limitations in our state. Do you have any tools? Do any of the tools stand out as an option given this limitation?
Thank you to our friend from Oahu. We are all envious of your job location. I did a quick
Michelle, can I just give a shout out to whoever that is? That's, you know, where I worked before joining AFT, Oahu RC&D. So I don't know if it's Dave or whoever, but aloha, good to see you. Thanks for your question. And then I'll pitch it back to you because it's a really hard question and it's a really big limitation in Hawaii. So go, Michelle.
Totally. So I did a quick keyword search of Hawaii in our report, and one came up. The Comet Farm tool announced that as of September 2020, that they have improved their model and included the addition of the state of Hawaii. So you know, that's all I have in terms of responding directly. Let's work together, representative, RC&D representative from Oahu, to make this you know, get this in front of the right decision makers, the right funders, be it federal and foundation, to help the tool developers prioritize the state of Hawaii, perhaps some other states, some other territories that have been left off the priority list, and let's solve this data limitation problem together. Please be in touch.
Great. There is another one. Where do we go to test out the tools?
Sounds like it's Dave. I think we've got a connection already from Oahu, Jean. He's
Yeah.
the person is saying it's Dave. I'm looking forward to a one-on-one session to follow up. Excellent. Sorry, read it out again, Kinsey.
Oh, sorry. Where do we go to test out the tools?
Well, Renee, you know, if you're talking about the tool that was just featured by Jean today, we will figure out how to get a sample out to all of the registrants today, and how we'll enable you to give it a test run. But for all the other tools, you know, you can just keyword search them in your internet browser, or if you're already in the Outcomes Estimation Tools Guide, there are, you know, every single time you see the name of a tool, it's likely a hyperlink, and it'll take you right to the website of each tool. So hopefully that gives you a lot to play with, a lot of clicking and popping in and out of tools.
I am going to give us our 5-minute warning just
Okay.
to be cognizant of everyone's time.
Sure. Thank you.
And I'm not seeing any more questions in here. So if you have, that's your 4-minute, I guess, warning to throw any last-minute questions in there that you have. If not, please be looking out for emails with the recording, and share this registration with your colleagues and friends, anyone that you think might find this interesting. And I'll leave it to Michelle or Aisha or Julie or Jean if they have any additional comments before we head out.
Yeah, no, just thank you to everybody who participated. Thank you for all the follow-up that's yet to come, and your partnership and your collaboration, your support on this collective outcomes estimation quantification journey, and do provide us with feedback in that evaluation survey so we can do an even better job in the next set of presentations by the tool developers featuring those tools themselves. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.